Hello, everyone. Really excited for Monica here because I don't think we've actually had anyone in the public health sector specifically, or at least in health tech, which is really interesting because of what's going on nowadays. But Monica, would you like to give a short introduction about yourself, a little bit about your background, some interests and hobbies?
Yeah, for sure. First off, I wanted to say thank you for having me, Christine. Love the topic of this podcast. A little bit more about me. So, I've had a really windy career path. I actually started my career over a decade ago. If I go to the very beginning, I was a pre-med student at NYU. So, I was studying pre-medicine alongside anthropology and gender studies. And that really had opened up my eyes to the different challenges in society, especially those that women face, and inspired me to go get my master's in public health and health policy and management. Shortly after that, I started my career in corporate healthcare. I worked on the corporate strategy side at Highmark Health. And then I got into the tech world and I've been there since. So I've been in tech startups for almost a decade now and have done a variety of roles. And as of today, I am the vice president of growth and strategy at HiLabs, which is a health tech company, as you've mentioned, focused on improving healthcare through AI and healthcare data. So very happy to be here.
Very excited to have you. So one of my first questions is what made you decide not to stay in health and just to navigate into like corporate or into health tech in this case?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think it came down to impact and scale. And I've always been somebody who wanted to drive impact at scale. And I felt the way to do that was working in the corporate world. And then very quickly, I realized tech allowed that disruption in a way that no other industry was. So I started my tech career at the time where tech startups were just becoming the new thing to do. And I have stuck with it because I love the disruption that comes with it, the innovation that comes with it. And it's such a privilege to be back at a place where healthcare and technology are intersecting so we can drive change at scale.
So can you also tell us about your career path and how you got here? Like what exactly is HiLabs, the story and inspiration behind it? It sounded like you were going from the corporate side and then you're going into tech. Like what exactly made you make that into tech in this case? And how did you even find out about HiLabs in the first place?
Yeah. So I can start a little bit with my background. So I started working at Highmark Health, which I mentioned, and I worked in business planning and then partnerships. So my whole job was to figure out how to expand the regional footprint for that network. So Highmark Health actually owns Allegheny Health Network. They're an integrated provider delivery system, which is a very unique setup. Actually, they're the third largest in the nation, or they were at that time. So I really understood the geographic nature of healthcare. I started to see how you can introduce new services into the market and what that does for your market share and all those types of things. But tech was quickly rising at the same time. And there was a tech company that partnered with Highmark and actually poached me. And that got my career started in tech. And once I got into tech, I had never thought with my background, especially in social sciences and just pure sciences, that I'd be working in the tech world. But I quickly realized that a lot of the framework that I had learned being a pre-med student studying chemistry in terms of having a hypothesis and solving a problem, that applied really well in the business world. And then furthermore, as I mentioned, with just thinking about impact and scale and solving problems, tech is able to do that at a pace and at a magnitude that's unseen in other industries. So I ended up sticking with it. And through my years in my tech startup career, I have done product marketing, operations, corporate strategy, like a variety of roles, but and in a variety of industries actually. So I've worked in behavioral health, I've worked in higher education, I've worked in pure healthcare, I've worked in retail, supply chain. So I've seen a lot of innovation happen in different industries, which has been fascinating from my perspective on tech. But ultimately, I wanted to come back to my roots. And my roots were really in something that's more socially grounded. And public health is what I'm passionate about. And I found HiLabs as a company that's taking AI and solving a public health issue with innovation and with disruptive technology. So I thought it was just a fascinating merge of the two areas. So a little bit more about HiLabs is that we use AI-powered technology to improve healthcare data. And healthcare data is touching every aspect of what healthcare payers, providers, and patients dictates their experience. That data goes everywhere and flows through every part of that ecosystem. So if there's something wrong with that data, you can have a myriad of issues that emerges. So we can think about access to care problems. So our bread and butter is actually our provider directory accuracy solution that improves directory data that's member facing. So if you or I, Christine, actually need to go look for a provider, we Google who's in network to our insurance, and then we try to find a provider that can meet our needs. That data is highly inaccurate. So that's one of the things that we solve with our technology. So you can start to see how the public health aspect of what we do comes through.
So what kind of data do you really work with? Is it really on that, like the patient relationship to the doctor in this case? Like, are you putting in health records, or kind of is a little bit of everything, including like, oh, what insurance is taken or all that kind of stuff?
It's honestly all of the above. So we work with, in this case, we're talking about directory data. So that's what health insurance plans get from providers and then publish for patients or members to then access and get access to care. So that's one aspect of what we work with, but we work with rosters. So that's how information comes into payers so they can see what providers they contract and network. We work with just healthcare operational data, claims data. So we have multiple use cases that we work with. And there's so many problems that we solve, which is another fascinating thing about the HiLabs solution, is that it's not just solving one use case. We look at the full ecosystem across payers, providers, and patients. So really amazing stuff that we do here.
So for anyone coming from a non-tech background, what are your biggest tips and recommendations on how to pivot into tech? It sounded like you focus more on your skills, in this case, like your planning and your business skills, and then you forayed into health and you kind of brought on your existing health background. Is that like what you ended up doing? Like, what are some tips that you would have for someone who comes from a non-tech background that goes into tech from that way?
I think that's a great question. And I'm the poster child for how you can do anything you put your mind to. So up until HiLabs, I was a director of product marketing at a retail tech company in the e-commerce space. So I think in tech, it's really possible to pivot as long as your skills can help the company grow. So naturally, there's some roles that are technology based, such as being a product manager or being, a developer that you can't just pivot into necessarily. But on the business side, I think there's a lot of opportunity for translatable skill sets. And if you really understand business just at its core, which it was my background, just understanding the P&L, understanding revenue growth, understanding market share, these basic concepts translate to any tech firm if you're on the business side. So I don't think that pivot was as difficult as one may think, but I also think you should just put yourself out there. I took a lot of risks. I put myself in jobs and positions that maybe nobody would actually evaluate me for that position based on my background if you just looked at that alone. But I tried to tell a really good story in my interviews. And if you can articulate well how your skills or experience can create value for that company, I think you can be considered for a lot of positions.
Yeah, and I actually think like the fact that you came from many different industries shows that you can adapt really well as well. So that's probably something that I would probably recommend to everyone. It's like not to say no to opportunities. You will always have something that you can take and then bring to your next role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really true. And in fact, I think it's one of my secret weapons. The more you get exposed to and you see different types of problem solving. So I mentioned retail tech, and now I work in healthcare. One of the fastest industries for disruption in the tech space you see in retail and e-commerce. So I bring that lens of what I've learned there to this job. So I think fundamentally all tech companies and tech startups in particular have the same DNA. And when you look at their performance and how they're trying to grow, there's not much difference. What's different is what is the problem that they're solving and how. Everything else is pretty much the same. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for anybody who's interested in pivoting. I absolutely encourage people all the time to have their eyes open and try to put their best foot forward. I don't think any door is ever closed in life.
Amazing. And one of the questions I had with how fast AI develops, what is your recommendation on how to stay up to date and what's going on and upskill? Like I work at Google, I still can't even stay up to date. So I'm really curious about how you do it.
Yeah, so I'll speak from the lens of healthcare. I think if you've ever heard of that concept of crossing the chasm, we're kind of like on the left side of that curve, where a lot of, if we think of our buyers, which are health insurance companies, it's becoming more industry norm to talk about digital disruption or digital innovation or digital transformation. Like, these are buzzwords in the industry, but what that actually means and how that can actually materialize at these companies is a little bit of uncharted territory. So it instills a lot of fear. But I think general thought leadership and just hearing and reading more about your industry and getting the pulse on it is helpful, because especially from like a go-to-market perspective, and from my role, thinking about how do we actually effectively sell to our buyers and tell the story well, you really need to understand where they're coming from. I think empathy is a really important part of sales and marketing in the tech world, and especially B2B tech. So we've kind of seen that, yes, there is a general consensus that there is a need for technology and disruption, but what that actually means and what is the impact of that creates a lot of fear and uncertainty. So a lot of our marketing materials and what I work with our team on is, how do we tell that story in a way that's valuable and meaningful? It tells a clear ROI story, or it connects it back to the patient. I think that's really important in terms of being successful, but you have to stay within your industry. I think if you're too far right on that curve of disruption, you're only going to get the very early adopters, which is a very small portion of the market.
What are some misconceptions that a lot of healthcare providers currently have today about AI, and what can you say about its development?
Yeah, so I would say I can answer more from the perspective of healthcare payers, because that's our buyer. I genuinely can't answer in terms of providers, but I think for payers, there is a lot of fear that can rise that it's going to displace a lot of jobs. And I think when we think about AI and how it can be implemented at a company and how it can change its operations, we talk about gaining capacity. We don't talk about displacement, but we say you can do more strategic tasks because we're going to automate all of the manual basic ones. So I think that's the biggest gain in terms of operational efficiency and capacity. And once we start to articulate it in those terms, I think our respective buyers tend to appreciate and understand that, because a lot of them do a lot of mundane tasks. And just generally speaking, as human beings, we're prone to errors. So when you start looking at healthcare data and the magnitude of that data at scale, you have lots of errors that can then materialize into massive dollars lost. It can materialize into access to care issues, as we spoke about. So once you can bring it down to the terms of what is the end value of this technology, what can it actually do for you, what is the ROI for it, I think people generally understand, and then they're willing to listen to us.
So being a woman in health leadership technology is very rare. How did you break the glass ceiling, and what advice do you have for others that are trying to break the glass ceiling?
I have lots of advice, because I think as a woman, you face very unique challenges. So I really felt that I was able to break a glass ceiling here at HiLabs. I'm our most senior woman, and I'm our youngest executive. So I broke two ceilings when I moved up here, and that was a really amazing opportunity. I'm so thankful for the opportunity I was given here. But I think you just have to be brave. That sounds really generic, but you have to believe in yourself, because there's a lot of people who will be able to surpass you unless you're persistent and you really believe in the value of what you can do. And the reality is, in my career, there have been plenty of opportunities where I think I got looked over because I was a woman, or, I'm in a meeting and somebody will look at my male colleague versus me. Those are realities of the situation. So you can't let those discourage you. To me, it's always fueled me to just put my foot down more, to make my voice louder. And that's motivated me. But I also understand the struggle as well. As a woman, I absolutely have that feeling of imposter syndrome. It happens. It even happens to this day, where I'll be, I feel like I'm the little girl at the conference table, and everybody else is a lot more senior and older than me. Are they going to really listen to what I have to say? So that's something that's always in the back of my mind. But It's a constant battle, but I just come back to myself and try to believe in what I do. I look at the impact of what I can drive with my teams. I look at the outcomes and the metrics and the numbers, and I just try to validate myself. But that's just my more internal perspective on how I manage my emotions. But I would say having a really strong support system is the next thing that I would recommend people have. I've always had great mentors. I work with a coach. I've been working with a coach for 3 years, and she's fabulous. And she helped me through a lot of these feelings and sentiments that come up through my work life. I have a really supportive partner. I have great friends. I have a lot of other female friends who are also really ambitious, and we can empathize with each other. So I think if you surround yourself with a strong support system, it can get you through a lot of those emotional humps that we face as women.
I think as you go higher, you feel lonelier. So how exactly did you build that support system?
I think on my way up, I've always had a sense that, like, as a woman, I have an obligation to lift other women up. There's no benefit in competing with one another. Life is equally hard, and circumstances are equally as hard for all of us. So I've always tried to be collaborative, to build those friendships, to build those peer relationships, to have people who mentor me, to mentor other people. You just keep spreading that love, more or less. And as I started to move up, I maintained those relationships. So I've always been a believer that relationships are almost like plants. You got to nurture them and water the plants and continue and do that so they continue to grow. So as I've moved up, I've just kept in touch with all of those people in my support system and in that network, and I never let go of it. And it's really served me well, because as you said, the top does get lonely. It's true.
All right. So moving forward, what are some obstacles you faced as a woman in your career? So not exactly just being in your leadership roles, but earlier in your career as well.
Yeah, I would say I have faced a variety of obstacles. Definitely people not taking me seriously. I think being a young woman, especially in careers like healthcare, where they're a little bit more traditional, or they've historically been more traditional. It was a lot of undermining that I faced. People not taking me seriously, as I mentioned. But again, for me, it just created more of an impetus to strengthen my voice and to speak louder and to persevere. But it was hard. I think it always felt like there was an uphill battle there. And as you can see, like, I present myself in a very feminine way, and I do that very intentionally because I don't want to water down my authentic feminine self. And it's been my priority, especially as a leader, to figure out how to lead authentically as a female. What does female leadership look like? We have a lot of role models in society of male leadership, but I wanted to establish something that not only felt authentically me, but was different than what I was seeing. So yeah, generally, I think not being taken seriously, sometimes actually being pretty blatantly discriminated against, people making comments and things of that nature. I've experienced all of it in my career, but none of it was able to really knock me down. And now that I've moved up, I really try to foster an environment of emotional and psychological safety for my team, whether they're men, women, younger people, older people. I just want everybody to feel very safe and able to express themselves authentically. And I think that's something that I consider a quality of my unique female leadership that I don't necessarily see in my male counterparts.
I love that because I can't relate to that, but I do definitely see leadership as certain women in orgs that I've been in, as they go up, they just kind of tone down their femininity. They start to wear more boring suits. They start to wear more boring shoes. They almost try to fit in with the more masculine counterparts. And I also see some, on the other hand, that are like, they wear bright green power suits and they have
Yeah.
their blowouts and everything. I'm like, wow, that
Yeah.
you're an executive and you look like that. It's like very empowering to see that. But at the same time, I still see the other spectrum where you're trying to like fit in, and that's their way in.
Yeah, it's always a challenge we're going to face as women until there's truly an equal number of us represented at all levels. We're not there yet, but it's that double-edged sword. It's almost like if I'm too soft, I won't be taken seriously. And if I'm too harsh, then people might think I'm a bitch. So it's like, what does that actually look like? Like, how do you lead in a way that's assertive but also warm? And that's what I'm always trying to balance in my leadership. and it's a conscious effort that I'm making. But I definitely felt as I moved up that I didn't want to water down who I was at all. And if my motto as a leader is to encourage people to be their authentic selves, I have to be my authentic self first. And I am a very boss bitch type of woman. So I'm going to lead with that first. And that I think encourages other people to also be their authentic selves, or so I think it does.
I love that. So just to kind of end it off, do you have any advice for any other women in the workplace in general?
I would say, persevere, figure out what's unique to you, and really lead with that. Because I think that, like, try to be memorable is kind of my point. If you are really strong analytically, lead with that. If you're really well spoken, lead with that. Like, that's really going to help you in your career because, again, as a woman, we're against the odds. So I think it's kind of the onus is on us to stand out more. Now, we can argue that's not really fair as a society, but we're never really going to get anywhere. So I'm a bigger believer in, like, how can we break these tiny little glass ceilings one by one, and then we'll start to change those things at the macroscopic level over time. But I would say be authentic, find your differentiator, find your brand, and really lead with that, and be memorable. And then alongside all those things, like, continue to be a good steward along the way, like help other people, help other women, bring other people up. And then in response, people are going to help you too. I think there is some type of synergy and symbiosis there. So if we can nurture that in each other, it sounds like a little cliche, but I've seen that work out well in my career. The people who supported me in the very beginning still support me today. And that's something to be celebrated. So.
Perfect. And what's on the horizon for you, or in 2024, or actually in 2025, since that's coming up, on for you or HiLab?
So 2024 was a really exciting year for us. As an executive team, we had the great success of raising $39 million in early spring. And that's a real testament to the problem that we're solving, as well as the exciting frontier for this company, because we're in an environment where that kind of funding is unheard of. So I think that alone for myself as well as HiLabs has created an exciting future for all the different things we can do to continue to solve the problems that we're solving, whether that's creating new products, new use cases, or going into new markets. So from a business standpoint, I think there's a lot of exciting things ahead as we continue to grow with our customers and grow in the market. For me as a leader, especially in the growth and strategy realm, there's a lot of work, but opportunity that comes with that too. And in my role in itself, I'm trying to just learn how to scale my team and nurture my team. I think that's really what's exciting for me as a leader going ahead. I came into this role only earlier this year. So there's still a lot of opportunity for me to scale my team and nurture my team and build my team. So not only am I helping us solve those problems as a company and get to our next chapter, but nurture my team to grow into their next level as professionals. So that's really what I'm focused on for the upcoming year.
Perfect. And to close it off, where can we find you on social media, and what can we do to support you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Monica Kohli. One time back, I actually had my own consulting firm and I was putting out some content. So maybe I'll get to a point that I'm doing that again. And then you can follow HiLabs as well, just to follow us on our journey and what we're doing with all the exciting things. And to support me, there's no ask I have. I think I would say, Christine, whatever you're doing, continue doing it, because having a forum for women to discuss these type of topics is super powerful. So I'll support you in what you're doing, and I think you can support me and other women in response.
Thank you so much. And usually I actually have this as an icebreaker, but I just really was interested in your background. Oh my God, the slide. If you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
If I had all the time in the world, I would be sipping rosé in France. And honestly, I would be writing a book. That's what I actually would love to do some point in the future. So I would love to have time to do that once I can.
Would that be like a memoir, fiction?
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking a memoir. I've had a very interesting life. This is just a small snippet of it. So I love the stories we can tell as humans to one another. And I think we can all relate with each other at some level. So I would love to tell that story one day.
Perfect. Really excited for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you so much.